want to start out with a question. When did Britain stop planning for the future? Not talking about the future, not publishing reports about the future, actually planning for it. Because when you look at Britain's biggest economic challenges, something strange becomes apparent. None of these are a surprise. If you take demographics, Britain's birth rate has been below replacement since the early 1970s. We've known for more than 50 years that future generations would be smaller than the ones before them, that the population would age, that healthcare demand is going to rise, that pension costs are going to increase. Or take productivity. Between 1971 and 2007, UK productivity grew by around about 2% a year on average. Since the financial crisis, that growth rate has completely collapsed to around a quarter of its previous level. That may sound like an abstract economic statistic. It isn't. If productivity had continued growing at the historic trend, the average British worker would likely be thousands of pounds better off a year. The IFS, Institute for Fiscal Studies, estimates that weak productivity growth is one of the single biggest reasons living standards have stagnated. And the question is why? Because Britain isn't short of talented people. We have some of the best universities in the world, a really highly educated workforce, globally respected research sectors, and yet output per worker increasingly lags behind countries such as the US. Why? Part of the answer is investment. According to the OECD, investment per worker in Britain has consistently lagged behind most comparable economies. British workers are not dramatically less capable than American workers. They simply have less capital working alongside them. So that's less investment, less infrastructure, less productive equipment, and less of an energy advantage. Once you begin looking at underinvestment, you see it absolutely everywhere. Employer investment in training has fallen by more than 36% since 2005. More than half of workplace training now lasts a day or less. Apprenticeship. Apprenticeship starts, they're below the levels we saw before the apprenticeship levy ever came about. And yet employers continue to report skill shortages across engineering, construction, manufacturing, healthcare, technology, pretty much every sector. We complain about a shortage of skilled workers whilst investing less in creating them. Then take a look at housing. In the late 1960s, we were building more than 350,000 homes a year. Last year, we built around 220,000. At the same time, the population has increased by around 10 million since the early 1990s. The average home costs more than 8 times the average earnings nationally. For a lot of younger people, home ownership has become something their parents achieved. These are 3 different problems: demographics, productivity, and housing. But notice what they've got in common. In every case, the trend was visible decades before it became a crisis. In every case, the solution was equally obvious: have more children, or plan for an older population, build more homes, invest in skills and capital, raise productivity. None of it required forecasting. It required only attention and willingness to act on what was already in plain sight. Britain had both the information and the time. What it didn't have repeatedly was the will. So instead, we chose delay. When the growth slowed, we decided to lower interest rates. When labour shortages emerged, we just imported labour. When housing became unaffordable, we expanded credit. When public services came under pressure, we just increased spending. And each response solved an immediate problem, and none of it the underlying cause. And you know what? For a while, that worked. Cheap debt masked weak productivity. Rising house prices created that illusion of growing prosperity. Migration helped ease labour shortages, and public spending softened those social pressures. The economy kept moving. The problem was that movement was increasingly mistaken for progress. Britain wasn't necessarily becoming richer, it was becoming better at postponing difficult decisions. And this is where I guess the international picture really matters. Every developed country is dealing with aging populations. Every developed country faces demographic pressure. Every developed country has experienced rising debt. But Britain entered this period with some unique weaknesses. That heavy dependence on financial services, persistent underinvestment, really poor productivity growth, and really high housing costs. Alongside that, the highest industrial electricity prices in the developed world. When the financial crisis arrived, Britain was exposed. When energy prices surged after Ukraine, Britain was exposed. When inflation returned, Britain was exposed. The shocks were global, but the vulnerabilities were very much local. And that distinction matters because it explains why so many people feel poorer despite living in one of the richest countries on earth. This is not simply a story about inflation or Brexit or COVID or immigration. Those events accelerated existing trends, they didn't create them. The deeper story is that Britain spent decades drawing down on the assets created by previous generations, whilst investing less into the things that generate future prosperity. Eventually, every country reaches the same moment, the moment when delay stops working. I think Britain is reaching that moment now because the bill for 25 years of postponed decisions is finally arriving. This is the first in a series of, I think, 5 videos that I'm going to put out about what social decline has looked like and the reasons why this has happened. And I'd love for you to join me in that journey and explore a little bit more around the real economics of what happened and how we can potentially look to solve some of these problems for future generations.